So I want to ask our guest speakers to come up here and join me. And Todd Whitley, where are you? Come over here. Todd is the chair of Hope for Peace and Justice. I'm the interim executive director. I like to pick up interim jobs. So I'm the interim executive director of Hope for Peace and Justice. And, we had a lot of discussion about who we wanted to honor on this 10th anniversary of our interrelated ministry partner, Hope for Peace and Justice. As a gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, gay and straight for all church, we know what it means to seek spiritual refuge. We weren't content to remain in the shadows in churches that were dangerous to our souls. And first we formed our own church just for gay people, and that was the first phase of our history. And we did welcome straight people, of course, then, but we didn't think that we had any allies. We thought that only gay people cared about gay people. And as time has progressed, we have built this beautiful place. We've joined the United Church of Christ because we want to become part of the whole world that we have helped to make. And so we know spiritually we don't want to settle for don't ask, don't tell. We don't want to settle for toleration, mere toleration. It's not enough to be open and affirming if that means all churches aren't open and affirming. We have come to expect and grown into our God-given identity full inclusion and participation and self-determination and collaboration, and we won't settle for anything less. This makes us natural allies with immigrants who are seeking refuge at this time in our country, as people always have, exercising the human right of migration. And though we have many politics represented here, I know that we understand what it means to seek refuge and what it means to be received with open arms. So we support immigrants, whether they're children or adults. And I know that Hope for Peace and Justice will be advocating for immigration reform with a full path to citizenship and amnesty and inclusion. Just wanted to go right there and say it. Even though that we may not be providing shelter for children right now in a way we were willing to step up, our work is not done until everyone finds a home that is safe and secure and warm and loving. So when we thought about who to honor today, locally, Judge Jenkins has taken bold and decisive leadership. And we want to say to you, thank you for stepping up in the midst of the din and chaos of prejudice and bigotry. Your voice called like a clarion to us to be our better selves. And you modeled leadership, what leadership really looks like. And you didn't do it to be popular, we know that. And we all the more appreciate you for that and for your conscience and your willingness to do the right thing and to evoke that from us. So we want to say to you, so this is our award.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Well, sit down. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You'll find out about us over time. We don't say what we don't mean. So,
Thank you.
And we say what we mean. So if you want to say something, we welcome you to.
Yeah, I'll just say this. My heart is filled with gratitude for your kindness today, but moreover, for what you did as a community to stand up for these children. As he said, leaders can call for reason and compassion, or they can incite fear and anger. but ultimately it's the community that responds. And here in Dallas County, our community has overwhelmingly chosen compassion, because at a time when others were standing in front of buses and turning them around, seeing these children as faceless immigrants that caused border concerns, we saw them for what they were and what they are. Children just like your child and my child, children made in the image of God just like you. Children who need to be loved and need to be reassured. And this community, more so than any other community in America, stood up and said, we love children, and these children aren't a burden to us, they're a blessing, and we want them to come here and we want to help. So thank you.
2 years ago, you may have seen the front cover of the New York Times Magazine, in which Jose Antonio Vargas came out as an undocumented American. He has used his considerable gifts throughout his career for truth-telling and his art as a writer to make sure that stories are told. And in this case, he has told a very bold story that has put him at great personal risk, and he continues to tell the story. And Jose, I said this earlier, I want to appreciate it about you again. We give you this award not only for the courage of sharing your story, but because the kind of leadership you have modeled through your films, through the work of Define American, has been to make it possible for other people to tell their stories too. The cover of Time magazine wasn't just your photo, it was 30 or more faces. And that's real leadership too. So thank you for telling your story. Thank you for freeing us to tell our stories and for inspiring us to our better selves. We will not rest until everyone has a home, and you have a home here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, now I have to get myself. Actually, I have to do something first. I have to take a photo of you. So, I've never given a sermon before, so say what's up. Great. First, let me thank you for your invitation to join you in worship this morning at the Cathedral of Hope, and for welcoming Define American, which is this organization that we started 3 years ago. And we cannot be any prouder to be in Dallas this morning. Just to be very transparent, I'm not a preacher. Those of you that do know my work know that I'm a writer and I'm a filmmaker and I'm a journalist. But nonetheless, I am thankful to your pastor and to this congregation for your invitation. And I'm thankful for your compassion. I frankly don't think I've ever been in a church of worship as inclusive and as compassionate as this. Today is actually the 21st years to the day that I arrived in the United States of America. I got here on August 3rd, 1993. It's 21 years today. I am here because my mother made the ultimate sacrifice, which is to put her own son, her only son, on a plane and say goodbye to him so that she could give him a better life. So she did that 21 years ago, and I haven't seen her since. That is the reality for undocumented people who are separated from their families, who spend years, if not decades, separated from their families. And the sermon today is actually dedicated not only to her, but to my grandfather. So he was the one that hatched a plan and convinced my mother to send me here. He was a security guard. He was a naturalized American citizen. He came here in the mid-'80s legally, and then became an American citizen in 1992. And when he became an American citizen, he changed his name from Teofilo to Ted, after Ted Danson from Cheers. Sometimes you gotta know where everybody knows your name. And my grandfather was an incredibly religious man. He was a Catholic. I was raised Catholic. He went to St. Athanasius Church 3 times a week. My grandmother said it was because he was atoning for all of our sins. And you know, when I was older, and I realized what my grandfather had done, I didn't know that he had gotten me the fake papers to come here until I was 16. And when I realized that he had bought the fake Social Security card and the fake green card and the fake passport so I could come here, because there was no other legal way for him to get me here. I don't know if you know this, but grandparents are not considered close enough of relatives to petition their grandkids. He explained to me that that's why he prayed a lot, because he felt guilty for what he did. You know, when you're a lower middle class person trying to make ends meet, you don't really meet with lawyers. You're afraid of lawyers. No offense to lawyers in the room. So that wasn't something my grandfather thought of at all. And I have to be really honest with you, since I'm talking about him. He died in 2007. You know, when I found out what he did, I was really mad at him. I didn't understand why he did what he did. I didn't understand why he didn't meet with lawyers. I didn't understand why he thought I could just come here, work under the table jobs at the flea market, and then marry an American woman, and then become a citizen. That was the plan. But then I told him, you know, I'm actually gay. It took us maybe 5-6 years and a lot of Will and Grace episodes to really understand each other. Right. He didn't have the words then, and I have them now, which is that he did what he did. He tried to do what he did. He tried to do the best for me because he wanted to provide for me. And that he thought that my future was better here than from the country of which he was born in, which is the Philippines. And everything that I do, I feel as if you find purpose when you find gratitude. So everything that I do is in gratitude for what my grandparents did, what my mother did, and for what this country has done for me. Because I arrived in this country with this really, really thick Filipino accent. Just imagine a 12-year-old kid who didn't really speak English all that well, and when a classmate would ask, "What's up?" I would say the sky, because I didn't know what slang was. One of my earliest memories was actually going to the grocery store for the first time. Where I'm from, you feed dogs and, leftover food. I had never seen a dog food aisle. So when I went to the grocery store and I see like the whole aisle of dog food, canned dog food, and then you go to the other aisle and then you see the people food, and then you realize that the dog food costs as much as the people food. It was very confusing to me. And I thought, wait a second, a country that values animals that much must value people that much. That was very interesting to me. And the whole idea of how this country view race from the very beginning was interesting, because I come from a place that was mostly Filipino. I never had a color attached to me. And hearing black and white, I feel as if this country invented white like it invented black. And in many ways now, with Latinos as the largest minority group and Asians as the fastest growing group, everybody's just really confused. None so more than me, because I always get asked where I'm from and why I look like this and why my name is Jose. I just say it's called the Philippines, it's called colonialism. And it's really, really important, I think, since I got here when I was 12, this very question of who an American is, and if I'm an American, was always something I had to ask. And I think history, I find a lot of comfort and a lot of peace in history. I find a lot of peace in studying Ellis Island, the country's first immigration station. Actually, it used to be called the Islands of Hopes and the Islands of Tears, where nearly 1 in 3 Americans can trace their European ancestors during one of the largest recorded migrations in history. I don't know if you know this, but between 1892 and 1955, about 12 million undocumented Europeans, white people, crossed the border known as the Atlantic Ocean and landed on Ellis Island. I didn't really know what WAP meant. If you're Italian, some people were called WAPs. I was recently told that it actually meant without papers. And what's interesting now is here we are, nearly, 60 years later, and we're arguing about the arrival of 12 million immigrants, undocumented immigrants, many of them coming from Latin American countries, some of them coming from Asia. So what's the difference between now and then? The laws are different, but we all know how laws are. A time in which in this country segregation was lawful, a time in this country when same-sex marriage was not only a mystery, but something that was illegal, and in some states it still is, a time in which interracial marriage was illegal. There's law and there's justice, and I think this country always asked us to ascertain the difference between the two. So is the difference because we look different and we have different food and we speak different languages? Is that the difference? And looking at history, I don't know if people realize this, but when you arrived on Ellis Island, if you had a first class or second class ticket, you were not really inspected. They inspected people who were in what they call steerage, the third class passengers. And the very first person that was actually let through Ellis Island on January 2nd, 1892, is a woman named Annie Moore from Ireland. She was 15 years old, and she came with her two younger brothers. So the three of them were actually unaccompanied young minors arriving in Ellis Island. Isn't it amazing how history repeats itself? And I'm saying that, and I'm saying this to you now, I am one of only 11 million, the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants in our country, many of us Americans in all but pieces of papers. Out of those 11 million, 1.7 million live in the state of Texas and call Texas their home, paying as much as $1.6 billion in state and local taxes just in 2010. Many of them in this county and in this city. And let's be totally honest, you are looking at the most privileged undocumented immigrant in America. People usually arrest us and detain us and deport us, and I'm here to you this morning delivering your sermon. While people are getting deported every day, while students are fearing for their lives, while workers are driving on the freeway wondering when a cop is going to stop them and arrest them because they don't have the right driver's license, I am talking to you and asking all of us to realize that immigration is way more complicated than the illegal in our minds and the U.S.-Mexico border. What is this border really about? I was recently in the Rio Grande Valley. I don't know how many people here have been to the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. I had never been. I didn't realize that when you live in that area, you live in a constitution-free, apartheid America that is separate and unequal, in which at any given point, a Border Patrol agent can ask you if you're an American citizen. 100 miles into Texas, there are checkpoints everywhere you go, and border security is a way of life. You know, when I was there, it was really interesting, because I ended up walking pretty close to the U.S.-Mexico border and watching all these trucks filled with goods just come in and out. And at that point, I had met people who have lived there 15, 16, 17 years that have never left their 42-mile radius. I met a young man, 26 years old, who got accepted to UT Austin, but couldn't go because he couldn't get past the checkpoint. And when I was talking to him, I asked him, what do you feel like when you're driving? It's not supposed to be driving, but you can't get around Rio Grande Valley. There's no buses, so you have to drive. So what do you think about when you're driving illegally without a driver's license? You know what he says? He says he has a conversation with God. Because he said it's up to God, and God knows that what he's doing is to pick up his mom at the hospital, to go to work, to pick up the brothers and sisters at school, that he's not doing anything wrong, and that God would know that. So this man, this young man who's grown up in Texas, who considers himself a Texan and an American, but who is called illegal, who is deemed as a criminal, he has a conversation with God whenever he gets behind a car, just to go around. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if you know that out of the billions of dollars that the state and our country has spent on border security, I don't think humanity has ever built a border that could withstand human will. So long as people are hungry, they will cross whatever border you put in front of them. And the bigger question is, what does the United States and the economic and foreign policies of this country have to do with migration? The pastor said an incredible thing, which is migration is a human right. The question that I ask myself coming from the Philippines is, if the Spanish and the Portuguese and the British and all those colonialists felt the freedom and the need to migrate and take over these countries, why can't we migrate now? As I'm standing in front of you, there are countless undocumented immigrants not only arrested but detained all throughout Texas. Texas is home to 25 detention centers, more than any other state. A wonderful woman who I was in a panel with yesterday here, Ms. Cohen, where is she? I think she's here. Hi. You called it yesterday what? The American Gulag, right? 25 detention centers in the state of Texas, costing Texas taxpayers I don't know how much money. And have you heard an immigrant who came here who did not work? Since the beginning of this country, immigrants come here to work. And if you want to know about the services that we cost you, that you think we may cost you, I suggest you talk to the IRS and to the Social Security Administration, who don't find any need to explain to the American public why they collect Social Security and taxes from undocumented workers like me. It would shock you the amount of facts that you don't hear about when you turn on the television. And yet, these human beings are being detained merely for providing for their own families. And that's why at times like this, when you hear of somebody like Judge Jenkins, all you have to do, I heard about him through 4 text messages within 5 minutes, a lot of Facebook messages and tweets saying, have you heard what this Judge Jenkins guy is doing? The Judge Jenkins that said, Dallas has shown brightest in this humanitarian crisis as a place of compassion, who said that we don't turn our back on children who flee death and chaos. We are here because the judge is here, because this great church is here, and we are here because this community defines American for us. That's why we're here. And when I heard about what Judge Jenkins did, I think about my mentors all throughout high school. So people now know what the DREAM Act is. I was a dreamer before there was a DREAM Act. When I was in high school, I didn't realize that if you're undocumented, you actually can't go to college. And if it wasn't for my high school principal, Pat Highland, who found me a private scholarship fund, I would not have gone to college. When I started working and started using doctored fake documents to work, I always wondered, why isn't the government, how come they not know that I'm not using the right documents? I got through the White House covering a state dinner. I won a Pulitzer turning in a form. I've paid taxes. Why isn't anybody talking to anybody about who's here and who's not? Talk about national security, by the way. And what's interesting to me is people have always said, well, they're not looking for you because you don't look like what they think you should look like, because you don't speak the way people think you should speak. What am I supposed to look like and how am I supposed to sound? You know what this sounds like? This sounds like Charlie Rose meets Dr. Dre. That's how I learned to speak English. It's true. And when you talk to second, third generation young Mexicans, Filipinos, Chinese, they sound precisely what they're supposed to sound like. I got in an argument, sort of argument, with a gentleman recently who said to me, but my great-grandparents came here and learned English from when they came here from Italy. Like, great, how long did it take your grandfather? 25 years. So what makes you think that the Mexicans and Filipinos and Chinese and Indians who are coming here don't want to learn English? What makes you think that we don't love America? We love America so much that we can actually withstand you calling us criminals. We love it so much that while we live our lives in fear of the very flag and the government that we pledge allegiance to, we stay here. That's why we love it, and that's how we love it. And at times like this, you rely on compassion, you rely on allies, and you rely on these 4 words. I've been looking at them since I've been here this morning. Inclusion, what it really means to be included. As a guy who has a Latino name, who looks Asian, who majored in African American studies in college, who's gay and who's undocumented, sometimes it's really hard to feel included. Compassion. What does compassion really mean? It doesn't mean tolerating. I'm going to tolerate these people. It means treating each other as you want to be treated. Liberation. What it means to be your full and your fullest self. And hope. Hope to me is hope. I am hopeful that this country will recognize me as one of its own, because this is my country. This is my home. I am hopeful that I will see my mother very soon. I am hopeful that all of you who have the privilege of being born in this country, because it is a privilege, that you do not take it for granted. And I am hopeful that in a hyper-political, hyper-partisan environment, you will look beyond politics to understand not only do we need solution and compassion, but we actually need to come to terms with the stranger and the other inside all of us. I'm not a preacher, but I read a lot of preachers, one of whom is Martin Luther King, who was a preacher, who said once, one of my favorite quotes, "History will record that in this period of social transition, the greatest tragedy is not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people." So we cannot afford for you to be silent, and I am so very much grateful to you and for your time. Amen. Thanks. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you.